Section 6 of the Art of Public Speaking. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Matthew Reese. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnagay and Joseph Berg Esenwein. Section 6. Pause and Power. The true business of the literary artist is to plait or weave his meaning, involving it around itself, so that each sentence by successive phrases shall first come into a kind of knot, and then, after a moment of suspended meaning, solve and clear itself. George Saintsbury, on English Prose Style, in Miscellaneous Essays. Pause has a distinctive value, expressed in silence. In other words, while the voice is waiting, the music of the movement is going on. To manage it, with its delicacies and compensations, requires that same fineness of ear on which we must depend for all faultless prose rhythm. When there is no compensation, when the pause is inadvertent, there is a sense of jolting and lack, as if some pin or fastening had fallen out. John Franklin Genung, The Working Principles of Rhetoric. Pause in public speech is not mere silence. It is silence made designedly eloquent. When a man says, it is with profound pleasure that I have been permitted to speak to you tonight, and I should say that is not pausing, that is stumbling. It is conceivable that a speaker may be effective in spite of stumbling, but never because of it. On the other hand, one of the most important means of developing power in public speaking is to pause either before or after, or both before and after, an important word or phrase. No one who would be a forceful speaker can afford to neglect this principle, one of the most significant that has ever been inferred from listening to great orators. Study this potential device until you have absorbed and assimilated it. It would seem that this principle of rhetorical pause ought to be easily grasped and applied, but a long experience in training both college men and maturer speakers has demonstrated that the device is no more readily understood by the average man when it is first explained to him than if it were spoken in Hindustani. Perhaps this is because we do not eagerly devour the fruit of experience when it is impressively set before us on the platter of authority. We like to pluck fruit for ourselves. It not only tastes better, but we never forget that tree. Fortunately, this is no difficult task in this instance, for the trees stand thick all about us. One man is pleading the cause of another. This man, my friends, has made this wonderful sacrifice for you and me. Did not the pause surprisingly enhance the power of this statement? See how he gathered up reserve force and impressiveness to deliver the words, for you and me. Repeat this passage without making a pause. Did it lose in effectiveness? Naturally enough, during a premeditated pause of this kind, the mind of the speaker is concentrated on the thought to which he is about to give expression. He will not dare to allow his thoughts to wander for an instant. He will rather supremely center his thought and his emotion upon the sacrifice whose service, sweetness, and divinity he is enforcing by his appeal. Concentration, then, is the big word here. No pause without it can perfectly hit the mark. Efficient pausing accomplishes one or all of four results. 1. Pause enables the mind of the speaker to gather his forces before delivering the final volley. It is often dangerous to rush into battle without pausing for preparation or waiting for recruits. Consider Custer's massacre as an instance. You can light a match by holding it beneath a lens and concentrating the sun's rays. You would not expect the match to flame if you jerk the lens back and forth quickly. Pause, and the lens gathers heat. Your thoughts will not set fire to the minds of your hearers unless you pause to gather the force that comes by a second or two of concentration. Maple trees and gas wells are rarely tapped continually. When a stronger flow is wanted, a pause is made. Nature has time to gather her reserve forces, and when the tree or the well is reopened, a stronger flow is the result. Use the same common sense with your mind. If you would make a thought particularly effective, pause just before its utterance. Concentrate your mind energies, and then give it expression with renewed vigor. Carlyle was right. Speak not, I passionately entreat thee, till thy thought has silently matured itself. Out of silence comes thy strength. Speech is silvern, silence is golden. Speech is human, silence is divine. Silence has been called the father of speech. It should be. Too many of our public speeches have no fathers. They ramble along without pause or break. Like Tennyson's brook, they run on forever. Listen to little children, the policeman on the corner, the family conversation around the table, and see how many pauses they naturally use, for they are unconscious of effects. When we get before an audience, we throw most of our natural methods of expression to the wind, and strive after artificial effects. Get back to the methods of nature, and pause. 2. Pause prepares the mind of the auditor to receive your message. Herbert Spencer said that all the universe is in motion. So it is, and all perfect motion is rhythm. Part of rhythm is rest. Rest follows activity all through nature. Instances: day and night, spring, summer, autumn, winter. A period of rest between breaths, an instant of complete rest between heartbeats. Pause and give the attention powers of your audience a rest. What you say after such a silence will then have a great deal more effect. When your country cousins come to town, the noise of a passing car will awaken them, though it seldom affects a seasoned city dweller. By the continual passing of cars his attention power has become deadened. In one who visits the city but seldom, attention value is insistent. To him the noise comes after a long pause, hence its power. To you, dweller in the city, there is no pause, hence the low attention value. After riding on a train several hours, you'll become so accustomed to its roar that it will lose its attention value, unless the train should stop for a while and start again. If you attempt to listen to a clock tick that is so far away that you can barely hear it, you will find that at times you are unable to distinguish it, but in a few moments the sound becomes distinct again. Your mind will pause for rest, whether you desire it to or not. The attention of your audience will act in quite the same way. Recognize this law and prepare for it by pausing. Let it be repeated, the thought that follows a pause is much more dynamic than if no pause had occurred. What is said to you of a night will not have the same effect on your mind as if it had been uttered in the morning, when your attention had been lately refreshed by the pause of sleep. We are told on the first page of the Bible that even the creative energy of God rested on the seventh day. You may be sure then that the frail, finite mind of your audience will likewise demand rest. Observe nature, study her laws, and obey them in your speaking. 3. Pause creates effective suspense. Suspense is responsible for a great share of our interest in life. It will be the same with your speech. A play or a novel is often robbed of much of its interest if you know the plot beforehand. We like to keep guessing as to the outcome. The ability to create suspense is part of woman's power to hold the other sex. The circus acrobat employs this principle when he fails purposely in several attempts to perform a feat, and then achieves it. Even the deliberate manner in which he arranges the preliminaries increases our expectation. We like to be kept waiting. In the last act of the play Polly of the Circus, there is a circus scene in which a little dog turns a backward somersault on the back of a running pony. One night, when he hesitated and had to be coaxed and worked with a long time before he would perform his feat, he got a great deal more applause than when he did his trick at once. We not only like to wait, but we appreciate what we wait for. If fish bite too readily, the sport soon ceases to be a sport. It is this same principle of suspense that holds you in a Sherlock Holmes story. You wait to see how the mystery is solved, and if it is solved too soon, you throw down the tale unfinished. Wilkie Collins' receipt for fiction writing well applies to public speech. Make 'em laugh, make 'em weep, make 'em wait. Above all else, make them wait. If they will not do that, you may be sure they will neither laugh nor weep. Thus pause is a valuable instrument in the hands of a trained speaker to arouse and maintain suspense. We once heard Mr. Bryan say in a speech, "It was my privilege to hear," and he paused, while the audience wondered for a second whom it was his privilege to hear. The great evangelist And he paused again. We knew a little more about the man he had heard, but still wondered to which evangelist he referred. And then he concluded. Dwight L. Moody. Mr. Bryan paused slightly again and continued. I came to regard him. Here he paused again, and held the audience in a brief moment of suspense as to how he had regarded Mr. Moody, then continued. As the greatest preacher of his day. Let the dashes illustrate pauses, and we have the following. It was my privilege to hear the great evangelist, Dwight L. Moody. I came to regard him as the greatest preacher of his day. The unskilled speaker would have rattled this off with neither pause nor suspense, and the sentences would have fallen flat upon the audience. It is precisely the application of these small things that makes much of the difference between the successful and the unsuccessful speaker. 4. Pausing after an important idea gives it time to penetrate. Any Missouri farmer will tell you that a rain that falls too fast will run off into the creeks and do the crops but little good. A story is told of a country deacon praying for rain in this manner. Lord, don't send us any chunk floater. Just give us a good old drizzle-drazzle. A speech, like a rain, will not do anybody much good if it comes too fast to soak in. The farmer's wife follows the same principle in doing her washing when she puts the clothes in water, and pauses for several hours that the water may soak in. The physician puts cocaine on your turbinates, and pauses to let it take hold before he removes them. Why do we use this principle everywhere except in the communication of ideas? If you have given the audience a big idea, pause for a second or two, and let them turn it over. See what effect it has. After the smoke clears away, you may have to fire another 14-inch shell on the same subject before you demolish the citadel of error that you are trying to destroy. Take time. Don't let your speech resemble those tourists who try to do New York in a day. They spend 15 minutes looking at the masterpieces in the Metropolitan Museum of Arts, 10 minutes in the Museum of Natural History, take a peep into the aquarium, hurry across the Brooklyn Bridge, rush up to the zoo, and back by Grant's Tomb, and call that seeing New York. If you hasten by your important points without pausing, your audience will have just about as adequate an idea of what you have tried to convey. Take time. You have just as much of it as our richest multimillionaire. Your audience will wait for you. It is a sign of smallness to hurry. The great redwood trees of California had burst through the soil 500 years before Socrates drank his cup of hemlock poison, and are only in their prime today. Nature shames us with our petty haste. Silence is one of the most eloquent things in the world. Master it, and use it through pause. In the following selections, dashes have been inserted where pauses may be used effectively. Naturally, you may omit some of these and insert others without going wrong. One speaker would interpret a passage in one way, one in another. It is largely a matter of personal preference. A dozen great actors have played Hamlet well, and yet each has played the part differently. Which comes nearest to perfection is a question of opinion. You will succeed best by daring to follow your own course, if you are individual enough to blaze an original trail. A moment's halt. A momentary taste of being from the well amid the waste. And lo, the phantom caravan has reached the nothing it set out from. Oh, make haste. The worldly hope men set their hearts upon turns ashes, or it prospers, and anon, like snow upon the desert's dusty face, lighting a little hour or two, is gone. The bird of time has but a little way to flutter, and the bird is on the wing. You will note that the punctuation marks have nothing to do with the pausing. You may run by a period very quickly and make a long pause where there is no kind of punctuation. Thought is greater than punctuation. It must guide you in your pauses. A book of verses underneath the bough, a jug of wine, a loaf of bread, and thou beside me singing in the wilderness. Oh, wilderness were paradise enow. You must not confuse the pause for emphasis with the natural pauses that come through taking breath and phrasing. For example, note the pauses indicated in this selection from Byron. But hush! Hark! That deep sound breaks in once more. And nearer, clearer, deadlier than before. Arm! Arm! It is the cannon's opening roar. It is not necessary to dwell at length upon these obvious distinctions. You will observe that in natural conversation our words are gathered into clusters or phrases, and we often pause to take breath between them. So in public speech, breathe naturally, and do not talk until you must gasp for breath, nor until the audience is equally winded. A serious word of caution here must be uttered. Do not overwork the pause. To do so will make your speech heavy and stilted. And do not think that pause can transmute commonplace thoughts into great and dignified utterance. A grand manner combined with insignificant ideas is like harnessing a Hambletonian with an ass. You remember the farcical old school declamation, A Midnight Murder, that proceeded in grandiose manner to a thrilling climax, and ended, and relentlessly murdered a mosquito. The pause, dramatically handled, always drew a laugh from the tolerant hearers. This is all very well in farce, but such anticlimax becomes painful when the speaker falls from the sublime to the ridiculous quite unintentionally. The pause, to be effective in some other manner than in that of the boomerang, must precede or follow a thought that is really worth while, or at least an idea whose bearing upon the rest of the speech is important. William Pittenger relates in his volume, Extempore Speech, an instance of the unconsciously farcical use of the pause by a really great American statesman and orator. He had visited Niagara Falls and was to make an oration at Buffalo the same day, but unfortunately he sat too long over the wine at dinner. When he arose to speak, the oratorical instinct struggled with difficulties, as he declared, "Gentlemen, I have been to look upon your magnificent cataract, 147 feet high. Gentlemen, Greece and Rome in their palmiest days never had a cataract 147 feet high." Questions and exercises. 1. Name 4 methods for destroying monotony and gaining power in speaking. 2. What are the 4 special effects of pause? 3. Note the pauses in a conversation, play, or speech. Were they the best that could have been used? Illustrate. 4. Read aloud selections on pages 50 through 54, paying special attention to pause. 5. Read the following without making any pauses. Reread correctly and note the difference. Soon the night will pass, and when of the sentinel on the ramparts of liberty the anxious ask, "Watchman, what of the night?" his answer will be, "Lo, the morn appeareth." Knowing the price we must pay, the sacrifice we must take, the burdens we must carry, the assaults we must endure, knowing full well the cost, yet we enlist, and we enlist for the war. For we know the justice of our cause, and we know, too, its certain triumph. Not reluctantly, then, but eagerly, not with faint hearts, but strong, do we now advance upon the enemies of the people. For the call that comes to us is the call that came to our fathers. As they responded, so shall we. He hath sounded forth a trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift our souls to answer him, be jubilant our feet, our God is marching on. Albert J. Beveridge, from his speech as temporary chairman of Progressive National Convention, Chicago, 1912. 6. Bring out the contrasting ideas in the following by using the pause. Contrast now the circumstances of your life and mine, gently and with temper, Aeschines. And then ask these people whose fortune they would each of them prefer. You taught reading, I went to school. You performed initiations, I received them. You danced in the chorus, I furnished it. You were assembly clerk, I was a speaker. You acted third parts, I heard you. You broke down, and I hissed. You have worked as a statesman for the enemy, I for my country. I passed by the rest, but this very day I am on my probation for a crown, and am acknowledged to be innocent of all offence, while you are already judged to be a pettifogger. And the question is, whether you shall continue that trade, or, at once, be silenced by not getting a fifth part of the votes. A happy fortune, do you see, you have enjoyed, that you should denounce mine as miserable. Demosthenes. 7. After careful study and practice, mark the pauses in the following. The past rises before me like a dream. Again we are in the great struggle for national life. We hear the sounds of preparation, the music of the boisterous drums, the silver voices of heroic bugles. We see thousands of assemblages, and hear the appeals of orators. We see the pale cheeks of women and the flushed faces of men. And, in those assemblages, we see all the dead whose dust we have covered with flowers. We lose sight of them no more. We are with them when they enlist in the great army of freedom. We see them part from those they love. Some are walking for the last time in quiet woody places with the maiden they adore. We hear the whisperings and the sweet vows of eternal love as they lingeringly part, forever. Others are bending over cradles, kissing babies that are asleep. Some are receiving the blessings of old men. Some are parting from those who hold them and press them to their hearts again and again and say nothing. And some are talking with wives, and endeavoring with brave words spoken in the old tones to drive from their hearts the awful fear. We see them part. We see the wife standing in the door, with the babe in her arms, standing in the sunlight sobbing. At the turn of the road, a hand waves. She answers by holding high in her loving hands the child. He is gone, and forever. Robert J. Ingersoll, to the Soldiers of Indianapolis. 8. Where would you pause in the following selections? Try pausing in different places and note the effect it gives. The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on. Nor all your piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all your tears wash out a word of it. The history of womankind is a story of abuse. For ages men beat, sold, and abused their wives and daughters like cattle. The Spartan mother that gave birth to one of her own sex disgraced herself. The girl babies were often deserted in the mountains to starve. China bound and deformed their feet. Turkey veiled their faces. America denied them equal educational advantages with men. Most of the world still refuses them the right to participate in the government, and everywhere women bear the brunt of an unequal standard of morality. But the women are on the march. They are walking upward to the sunlit plains where the thinking people rule. China has ceased binding their feet. In the shadow of the harem, Turkey has opened a school for girls. America has given women equal educational advantages, and America, we believe, will enfranchise them. We can do little to help, and not much to hinder, this great movement. The thinking people have put their OK upon it. It is moving forward to its goal just as surely as this old earth is swinging from the grip of winter toward the spring's blossoms and the summer's harvest. From an editorial by D.C. in Leslie's Weekly, June 4, 1914. Used by permission. 9. Read aloud the following address, paying careful attention to pause wherever the emphasis may thereby be heightened. The irrepressible conflict. At last the Republican party has appeared. It avows now, as the Republican party of 1800 did, in one word, its faith and its works: equal and exact justice to all men. Even when it first entered the field, only half organized, it struck a blow which only just failed to secure complete and triumphant victory. In this, its second campaign, it has already won advantages which render that triumph now both easy and certain. The secret of its assured success lies in that very characteristic which, in the mouth of scoffers, constitutes its great and lasting imbecility and reproach. It lies in the fact that it is a party of one idea, but that is a noble one, an idea that fills and expands all generous souls, the idea of equality of all men before human tribunals and human laws, as they are all equal before the divine tribunal and divine laws. I know, and you know, that a revolution has begun. I know, and all the world knows, that revolutions never go backward. 20 senators and 100 representatives proclaim boldly in Congress today sentiments and opinions and principles of freedom, which hardly so many men, even in this free state, dared to utter in their own homes 20 years ago. While the government of the United States, under the conduct of the Democratic party, has been all that time surrendering one plain and castle after another to slavery, the people of the United States have been no less steadily and perseveringly gathering together the forces with which to recover back again all the fields and all the castles which have been lost, and to confound and overthrow by one decisive blow the betrayers of the Constitution and freedom forever. W. H. Seward. End of Section 6. Recording by Matthew Reese, Davenport, Iowa.
Section 7 of The Art of Public Speaking. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Bill Mosley. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnagay and Joseph Berg Esenwein. Section 7. Efficiency through Inflection. How soft the music of those village bells, falling at intervals upon the ear in cadence sweet, now dying all away, now pealing loud again and louder still, clear and sonorous as the gale comes on. With easy force it opens all the cells where memory slept. William Cowper, The Task. Herbert Spencer remarked that cadence, by which he meant the modulation of the tones of the voice in speaking, is the running commentary of the emotions upon the propositions of the intellect. How true this is will appear when we reflect that the little upward and downward shadings of the voice tell more truly what we mean than our words. The expressiveness of language is literally multiplied by this subtle power to shade the vocal tones, and this voice shading we call inflection. The change of pitch within a word is even more important, because more delicate than the change of pitch from phrase to phrase. Indeed, one cannot be practiced without the other. The bare words are only so many bricks. Inflection will make them a pavement, a garage, or a cathedral. It is the power of inflection to change the meaning of words that gave birth to the old saying, "It is not so much what you say as how you say it." Mrs. Jameson, the Shakespearean commentator, has given us a penetrating example of the effect of inflection. In her impersonation of the part of Lady Macbeth, Mrs. Siddons adopted successively 3 different intonations in giving the words, "We fail." At first, a quick, contemptuous interrogation, "We fail?" Afterwards, with the note of admiration, "We fail." An accent of indignant astonishment, laying the principal emphasis on the word "we." "We fail?" Lastly, she fixed on what I am convinced is the true reading, "We fail," with the simple period, modulating the voice to a deep, low, resolute tone, which settles the issue at once, as though she had said, "If we fail, why, then we fail, and all is over." This most expressive element in our speech is the last to be mastered in attaining to naturalness in speaking a foreign language, and its correct use is the main element in a natural, flexible utterance of our native tongue. Without varied inflections, speech becomes wooden and monotonous. There are but 2 kinds of inflection, the rising and the falling. Yet these 2 may be so shaded or so combined that they are capable of producing as many varieties of modulation as may be illustrated by either 1 or 2 lines, straight or curved, thus: sharp rising, long rising, level, long falling, sharp rising and falling, sharp falling and rising, hesitating. These may be varied indefinitely and serve merely to illustrate what wide varieties of combination may be effected by these 2 simple inflections of the voice. It is impossible to tabulate the various inflections which serve to express various shades of thought and feeling. A few suggestions are offered here, together with abundant exercises for practice. But the only real way to master inflection is to observe, experiment, and practice. For example, take the common sentence, "Oh, he's all right." Note how a rising inflection may be made to express faint praise, or polite doubt, or uncertainty of opinion. Then note how the same word, spoken with a generally falling inflection, may denote certainty, or good-natured approval, or enthusiastic praise, and so on. In general, then, we find that a bending upward of the voice will suggest doubt and uncertainty, while a decided falling inflection will suggest that you are certain of your ground. Students dislike to be told that their speeches are not so bad, spoken with a rising inflection. To enunciate these words with a long falling inflection would endorse the speech rather heartily. Not so bad. Say good-bye to an imaginary person whom you expect to see again tomorrow, then to a dear friend you never expect to meet again. Note the difference in inflection. "I have had a delightful time," when spoken at the termination of a formal tea by a frivolous woman, takes altogether different inflection than the same words spoken between lovers who have enjoyed themselves. Mimic the 2 characters in repeating this, and observe the difference. Note how light and short the inflections are in the following brief quotation from Anthony the Absolute by Samuel Mervyn. At sea, March 28th. This evening I told Sir Robert What's-his-name he was a fool. I was quite right in this. He is. Every evening since the ship left Vancouver he has presided over the round table in the middle of the smoking room. There he sips his coffee and liqueur, and holds forth on every subject known to the mind of man. Each subject is his subject. He is an elderly person with a bad face and a drooping left eyelid. They tell me that he is in the British service, a judge somewhere down in Malaysia, where they drink more than is good for them. Deliver the two following selections with great earnestness, and note how the inflections differ from the foregoing. Then reread these selections in a light, superficial manner, noting that the change of attitude is expressed through a change of inflection. When I read a sublime fact in Plutarch, or an unselfish deed in a line of poetry, or thrill beneath some heroic legend, it is no longer fairyland. I have seen it matched. Wendell Phillips. Thought is deeper than all speech, feeling deeper than all thought. Souls to souls can never teach what unto themselves was taught. Cranch. It must be made perfectly clear that inflection deals mostly in subtle, delicate shading within single words, and is not by any means accomplished by a general rise or fall in the voice in speaking a sentence. Yet certain sentences may be effectively delivered with just such inflection. Try this sentence in several ways, making no modulation until you come to the last two syllables, as indicated. And yet I told him distinctly. And yet I told him distinctly. And yet I told him distinctly. Now try this sentence by inflecting the important words so as to bring out various shades of meaning. The first forms illustrated show change of pitch within a single word. The forms you will work out for yourself should show a number of such inflections throughout the sentence. One of the chief means of securing emphasis is to employ a long falling inflection on the emphatic words. That is, to let the voice fall to a lower pitch on an interior vowel sound in a word. Try it on the words every, eleemosynary, and destroy. Use long falling inflections on the italicized words in the following selection, noting their emphatic power. Are there any other words here that long falling inflections would help to make expressive? Address in the Dartmouth College case. This, sir, is my case. It is the case not merely of that humble institution. It is the case of every college in our land. It is more. It is the case of every eleemosynary institution throughout our country, of all those great charities founded by the piety of our ancestors to alleviate human misery and scatter blessings along the pathway of life. Sir, you may destroy this little institution. It is weak. It is in your hands. I know it is one of the lesser lights in the literary horizon of our country. You may put it out, but if you do, you must carry through your work. You must extinguish one after another all those great lights of science which for more than a century have thrown their radiance over our land. It is, sir, as I have said, a small college, and yet there are those who love it. Sir, I know not how others may feel, but as for myself, when I see my alma mater surrounded, like Caesar in the Senate House, by those who are reiterating stab after stab, I would not for this right hand have her turn to me and say, "And thou, too, my son?" Daniel Webster. Be careful not to over-inflect. Too much modulation produces an unpleasant effect of artificiality, like a mature matron trying to be kittenish. It is a short step between true expression and unintentional burlesque. Scrutinize your own tones. Take a single expression like, "Oh, no," or "Oh, I see," or "Indeed," and by patient self-examination see how many shades of meaning may be expressed by inflection. This sort of common-sense practice will do you more good than a book of rules. But don't forget to listen to your own voice. Questions and exercises. 1. In your own words, define A. Cadence, B. Modulation, C. Inflection, D. Emphasis. 2. Name 5 ways of destroying monotony and gaining effectiveness in speech. 3. What states of mind does falling inflection signify? Make as full a list as you can. 4. Do the same for rising inflection. 5. How does the voice bend in expressing A. Surprise, B. Shame, C. Hate, D. Formality, E. Excitement. 6. Reread some sentence several times, and by using different inflections, change the meaning with each reading. 7. Note the inflections employed in some speech or conversation. Were they the best that could be used to bring out the meaning? Criticize and illustrate. 8. Render the following passages. Has the gentleman done? Has he completely done? And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. 9. Invent an indirect question and show how it would naturally be inflected. 10. Does a direct question always require a rising inflection? Illustrate. 11. Illustrate how the complete ending of an expression or of a speech is indicated by inflection. 12. Do the same for incompleteness of idea. 13. Illustrate A. Trembling, B. Hesitation, and C. Doubt by means of inflection. 14. Show how contrast may be expressed. 15. Try the effects of both rising and falling inflections on the italicized words in the following sentences. State your preference. Gentlemen, I am persuaded, nay, I am resolved to speak. It is sown a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. Selections for practice. In the following selections, secure emphasis by means of long falling inflections rather than loudness. repeat these selections, attempting to put into practice all the technical principles that we have thus far had, emphasizing important words, subordinating unimportant words, variety of pitch, changing tempo, pause, and inflection. If these principles are applied, you will have no trouble with monotony. Constant practice will give great facility in the use of inflection and will render the voice itself flexible. Charles I. We charge him with having broken his coronation oath, and we are told that he kept his marriage vow. We accuse him of having given up his people to the merciless inflictions of the most hot-headed and hard-hearted of prelates, and the defense is that he took his little son on his knee and kissed him. We censure him for having violated the articles of the Petition of Right, after having for good and valuable consideration promised to observe them, and we are informed that he was accustomed to hear prayer at 6 o'clock in the morning. It is to such considerations as these, together with his Vandyke dress, his handsome face, and his peaked beard, that he owes, we verily believe, most of his popularity with the present generation. T. B. Macaulay. Abraham Lincoln. We needed not that he should put on paper that he believed in slavery, who with treason, with murder, with cruelty infernal, hovered around that majestic man to destroy his life. He was himself but the long sting with which slavery struck at liberty, and he carried the poison that belonged to slavery. As long as this nation lasts, it will never be forgotten that we have one martyred president. Never, never, while time lasts, while heaven lasts, while hell rocks and groans, will it be forgotten that slavery, by its minions, slew him, and in slaying him, made manifest its whole nature and tendency. But another thing for us to remember is that this blow was aimed at the life of the government and of the nation. Lincoln was slain, America was meant. The man was cast down, the government was smitten at. It was the president who was killed. It was national life, breathing freedom and meaning beneficence, that was sought. He, the man of Illinois, the private man, divested of robes and the insignia of authority, representing nothing but his personal self, might have been hated, but that would not have called forth the murderer's blow. It was because he stood in the place of government, representing government, and a government that represented right and liberty, that he was singled out. This, then, is a crime against universal government. It is not a blow at the foundations of our government, more than at the foundations of the English government, of the French government, of every compact and well-organized government. It was a crime against mankind. The whole world will repudiate and stigmatize it as a deed without a shade of redeeming light. The blow, however, has signally failed. The cause is not stricken. It is strengthened. This nation has dissolved, but in tears only. It stands foursquare, more solid today than any pyramid in Egypt. This people are neither wasted, nor daunted, nor disordered. Men hate slavery and love liberty with stronger hate and love today than ever before. The government is not weakened, it is made stronger. And now the martyr is moving in triumphal march, mightier than when alive. The nation rises up at every stage of his coming. Cities and states are his pallbearers, and the cannon beats the hours with solemn progression. Dead, 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 he yet speaketh. Is Washington dead? Is Hampton dead? Is David dead? Is any man dead that ever was fit to live? Disenthralled of flesh, and risen to the unobstructed sphere where passion never comes, he begins his illimitable work. His life now is grafted upon the infinite, and will be fruitful as no earthly life can be. Pass on, thou that hast overcome. Your sorrows, O people, are his peace. Your bells and bands and muffled drums sound triumph in his ear. Wail and weep here. God makes it echo joy and triumph there. Pass on, victor. 4 years ago, O Illinois, we took from your midst an untried man, and from among the people we return him to you, a mighty conqueror. Not thine any more, but the nation's. Not ours, but the world's. Give him place, ye prairies. In the midst of this great continent his dust shall rest, a sacred treasure to myriads who shall make pilgrimage to that shrine to kindle anew their zeal and patriotism. Ye winds, that move over the mighty places of the West, chant his requiem. Ye people, behold a martyr, whose blood, as so many inarticulate words, pleads for fidelity, for law, for liberty. Henry Ward Beecher. The History of Liberty. The event which we commemorate is all-important, not merely in our own annals, but in those of the world. The sententious English poet has declared that the proper study of mankind is man, and of all inquiries of a temporal nature, the history of our fellow beings is unquestionably among the most interesting. But not all the chapters of human history are alike important. The annals of our race have been filled up with incidents which concern not, or at least ought not to concern, the great company of mankind. History, as it has often been written, is the genealogy of princes, the field book of conquerors, and the fortunes of our fellow men have been treated only so far as they have been affected by the influence of the great masters and destroyers of our race. Such history is, I will not say a worthless study, for it is necessary for us to know the dark side as well as the bright side of our condition. But it is a melancholy study which fills the bosom of the philanthropist and the friend of liberty with sorrow. But the history of liberty, the history of men struggling to be free, the history of men who have acquired and are exercising their freedom, the history of those great movements in the world by which liberty has been established and perpetuated, forms a subject which we cannot contemplate too closely. This is the real history of man, of the human family, of rational, immortal beings. The trial of adversity was theirs. The trial of prosperity is ours. Let us meet it as men who know their duty and prize their blessings. Our position is the most enviable, the most responsible, which men can fill. If this generation does its duty, the cause of constitutional freedom is safe. If we fail, not only do we defraud our children of the inheritance which we received from our fathers, but we blast the hopes of the friends of liberty throughout our continent, throughout Europe, throughout the world, to the end of time. History is not without her examples of hard-fought fields, where the banner of liberty has floated triumphantly on the wildest storm of battle. She is without her examples of people by whom the dear-bought treasure has been wisely employed and safely handed down. The eyes of the world are turned for that example to us. Let us then, as we assemble on the birthday of the nation, as we gather upon the green turf, once wet with precious blood, let us devote ourselves to the sacred cause of constitutional liberty. Let us abjure the interests and passions which divide the great family of American freemen. Let the rage of party spirit sleep today. Let us resolve that our children shall have cause to bless the memory of their fathers, as we have cause to bless the memory of ours. Edward Everett. End of Section 7. Recording by Bill Moseley, Frelsburg, Texas, USA.
Of the Art of Public Speaking. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Matthew Reese. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnagay and Joseph Berg Esenwein. Section 8. Concentration in Delivery. Attention is the microscope of the mental eye. Its power may be high or low, its field of view narrow or broad. When high power is used, attention is confined within very circumscribed limits, but its action is exceedingly intense and absorbing. It sees but few things, but these few things are observed through and through. Mental energy and activity, whether of perception or of thought, thus concentrated, act like the sun's rays concentrated by the burning glass. The object is illumined, heated, set on fire. Impressions are so deep that they can never be effaced. Attention of this sort is the prime condition of the most productive mental labor. Daniel Putnam, Psychology. Try to rub the top of your head forward and backward at the same time that you are patting your chest. Unless your powers of coordination are well developed, you will find it confusing, if not impossible. The brain needs special training before it can do two or more things efficiently at the same instant. It may seem like splitting a hair between its north and northwest corner, but some psychologists argue that no brain can think two distinct thoughts absolutely simultaneously. That what seems to be simultaneous is really very rapid rotation from the first thought to the second and back again, just as in the above-cited experiment the attention must shift from one hand to the other until one or the other movement becomes partly or wholly automatic. Whatever is the psychological truth of this contention, it is undeniable that the mind measurably loses grip on one idea the moment the attention is projected decidedly ahead to a second or a third idea. A fault in public speakers that is as pernicious as it is common is that they try to think of the succeeding sentence while still uttering the former, and in this way their concentration trails off. In consequence, they start their sentences strongly and end them weakly. In a well-prepared written speech, the emphatic word usually comes at one end of the sentence. But an emphatic word needs emphatic expression, and this is precisely what it does not get when concentration flags by leaping too soon to that which is next to be uttered. Concentrate all your mental energies on the present sentence. Remember that the mind of your audience follows yours very closely, and if you withdraw your attention from what you are saying to what you are going to say, your audience will also withdraw theirs. They may not do so consciously and deliberately, but they will surely cease to give importance to the things that you yourself slight. It is fatal to either the actor or the speaker to cross his bridges too soon. Of course, all this is not to say that in the natural pauses of your speech you are not to take swift forward surveys. These are as important as the forward look in driving a motor car. The caution is of quite another sort. While speaking one sentence, do not think of the sentence to follow. Let it come from its proper source, within yourself. You cannot deliver a broadside without concentrated force. That is what produces the explosion. In preparation, you store and concentrate thought and feeling. In the pauses during delivery, you swiftly look ahead and gather yourself for effective attack. During the moments of actual speech, speak. Don't anticipate. Divide your attention, and you divide your power. The matter of the effect of the inner man upon the outer needs a further word here, particularly as touching concentration. "What do you read, my lord?" Hamlet replied, "Words, words, words." That is a world-old trouble. The mechanical calling of words is not expression by a long stretch. Did you ever notice how hollow a memorized speech usually sounds? You have listened to the ranting mechanical cadence of inefficient actors, lawyers, and preachers. Their trouble is a mental one. They are not concentratedly thinking thoughts that cause words to issue with sincerity and conviction, but are merely enunciating word sounds mechanically. Painful experience alike to audience and to speaker. A parrot is equally eloquent. Again, let Shakespeare instruct us. This time in the insincere prayer of the king, Hamlet's uncle. He laments thus pointedly: "My words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go." The truth is that as a speaker your words must be born again every time they are spoken. Then they will not suffer in their utterance, even though perforce committed to memory and repeated, like Dr. Russell Conwell's lecture, Acres of Diamonds, 5,000 times. Such speeches lose nothing by repetition, for the perfectly patent reason that they arise from concentrated thought and feeling, and not a mere necessity for saying something, which usually means anything, and that, in turn, is tantamount to nothing. If the thought beneath your words is warm, fresh, spontaneous, a part of yourself, your utterance will have breath and life. Words are only a result. Do not try to get the result without stimulating the cause. Do you ask how to concentrate? Think of the word itself, and of its philological brother, concentric. Think of how a lens gathers and concenters the rays of light within a given circle. It centers them by a process of withdrawal. It may seem like a harsh saying, but the man who cannot concentrate is either weak of will, a nervous wreck, or has never learned what will power is good for. You must concentrate by resolutely withdrawing your attention from everything else. If you concentrate your thought on a pain which may be afflicting you, that pain will grow more intense. Count your blessings, and they will multiply. Center your thought on your strokes, and your tennis play will gradually improve. To concentrate is simply to attend to one thing, and attend to nothing else. If you find that you cannot do that, there is something wrong. Attend to that first. Remove the cause and the symptom will disappear. Read the chapter on will power. Cultivate your will by willing and then doing at all costs. Concentrate, and you will win. Questions and exercises. 1. Select from any source several sentences suitable for speaking aloud. Deliver them first in the manner condemned in this chapter, and second with due regard for emphasis toward the close of each sentence. 2. Put into about 100 words your impression of the effect produced. 3. Tell of any peculiar methods you may have observed or heard of by which speakers have sought to aid their powers of concentration, such as looking fixedly at a blank spot in the ceiling, or twisting a watch charm. 4. What effect do such habits have on the audience? 5. What relation does pause bear to concentration? 6. Tell why concentration naturally helps a speaker to change pitch, tempo, and emphasis. 7. Read the following selection through to get its meaning and spirit clearly in your mind. Then read it aloud, concentrating solely on the thought that you are expressing. Do not trouble about the sentence or thought that is coming. Half the troubles of mankind arise from anticipating trials that never occur. Avoid this in speaking. Make the end of your sentences just as strong as the beginning. Concentrate. War. The last of the savage instincts is war. The caveman's club made law and procured food. Might decreed right. Warriors were saviors. In Nazareth, a carpenter laid down the saw and preached the brotherhood of man. 12 centuries afterwards, his followers marched to the Holy Land to destroy all who differed with them in the worship of the God of love. Triumphantly they wrote, "In Solomon's porch and in his temple our men rode in the blood of the Saracens up to the knees of their horses." History is an appalling tale of war. In the 17th century, Germany, France, Sweden, and Spain warred for 30 years. At Magdeburg, 30,000 out of 36,000 were killed regardless of sex or age. In Germany, schools were closed for a third of a century, homes burned, women outraged, towns demolished, and the untilled land became a wilderness. 2/3 of Germany's property was destroyed, and 18 million of her citizens were killed, because men quarreled about the way to glorify the Prince of Peace. Marching through rain and snow, sleeping on the ground, eating stale food, or starving, contracting diseases and facing guns that fire 600 times a minute, for 50 cents a day. This is the soldier's life. At the window sits the widowed mother crying. Little children with tearful faces pressed against the pane watch and wait. Their means of livelihood, their home, their happiness, is gone. Fatherless children, broken-hearted women, sick, disabled, and dead men. This is the wage of war. We spend more money preparing men to kill each other than we do in teaching them to live. We spend more money building one battleship than in the annual maintenance of all our state universities. The financial loss resulting from destroying one another's homes in the Civil War would have built 15 million houses, each costing $2,000. We pray for love, but prepare for hate. We preach peace, but equip for war. Were half the power that fills the world with terror, were half the wealth bestowed on camp and court given to redeem this world from error, there would be no need of arsenal and fort. War only defers a question. No issue will ever really be settled until it is settled rightly. Like rival gun gangs in a back alley, the nations of the world through the bloody ages have fought over their differences. Denver cannot fight Chicago, and Iowa cannot fight Ohio. Why should Germany be permitted to fight France, or Bulgaria fight Turkey? When mankind rises above creeds, colors, and countries, when we are citizens not of a nation but of the world, the armies and navies of the earth will constitute an international police force to preserve the peace, and the dove will take the eagle's place. Our differences will be settled by an international court with the power to enforce its mandates. In times of peace, prepare for peace. The wages of war are the wages of sin, and the wages of sin is death. Editorial by D.C., Leslie's Weekly. Used by permission. End of Section 8. Recording by Matthew Reese, Davenport, Iowa. Of the Art of Public Speaking. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Matthew Reese. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnagay and Joseph Berg Esenwein. Section 9. Force. However, 'tis expedient to be wary. Indifference, certes, don't produce distress, and rash enthusiasm in good society were nothing but a moral inebriety. Byron, Don Juan. You have attended plays that seemed fair, yet they did not move you, grip you. In theatrical parlance, they failed to get over, which means that their message did not get over the footlights to the audience. There was no punch, no jab to them. They had no force. Of course, All this spells disaster, in big letters, not only in a stage production, but in any platform effort. Every such presentation exists solely for the audience, and if it fails to hit them, and the expression is a good one, it has no excuse for living, nor will it live long. What is force? Some of our most obvious words open up secret meanings under scrutiny, and this is one of them. To begin with, we must recognize the distinction between inner and outer force. The one is cause, the other effect. The one is spiritual, the other physical. In this important particular, animate force differs from inanimate force. The power of man, coming from within and expressing itself outwardly, is of another sort from the force of Shimo's powder, which awaits some influence from without to explode it. However susceptive to outside stimuli, the true source of power in man lies within himself. This may seem like mere psychology, but it has an intensely practical bearing on public speaking, as will appear. Not only must we discern the difference between human force and mere physical force, but we must not confuse its real essence with some of the things that may and may not accompany it. For example, loudness is not force, though force at times may be attended by noise. Mere roaring never made a good speech, yet there are moments, mind you, not minutes, when big voice power may be used with tremendous effect. Nor is violent motion force, yet force may result in violent motion. Hamlet counseled the players, "Nor do not saw the air too much with your hand, thus, but use all gently. For in the very torrent, tempest, and, as I may say, whirlwind of your passion, you must acquire and beget a temperance, that may give it smoothness. Oh, it offends me to the soul, to hear a robustious periwig-pated fellow tear a passion to tatters, to very rags, to split the ears of the groundlings, who, for the most part, are capable of nothing but inexplicable dumb show and noise. I would have such a fellow whipped for o'erdoing termagant. It out-Herods Herod. Pray you avoid it. Be not too tame, neither, but let your discretion be your tutor. Suit the action to the word to the action, with this special observance that you o'erstep not the modesty of nature, for anything so overdone is from the purpose of playing, whose end both at the first and now was and is, to hold, as 'twere, the mirror up to nature, to show virtue her own feature, scorn her own image, and the very age and body of the time his form and pressure. Now this overdone, or come tardy off, though it make the unskilful laugh, cannot but make the judicious grieve, the censure of the which one must, in your allowance, o'erweigh a whole theatre of others. Oh, there be players that I have seen play, and heard others praise, and that highly, not to speak it profanely, that, neither having the accent of Christians, nor the gait of Christian, pagan, or man, have so strutted and bellowed, that I have thought some of nature's journeymen had made men, and not made them well, they imitated humanity so abominably. Hamlet, Act III, Scene 2. Force is both a cause and an effect. Inner force, which must precede outer force, is a combination of four elements, acting progressively. First of all, force arises from conviction. You must be convinced of the truth, or the importance, or the meaning of what you are about to say, before you can give it forceful delivery. It must lay strong hold upon your convictions before it can grip your audience. Conviction convinces. The Saturday Evening Post, in an article on England's T.R., Winston Spencer Churchill, attributed much of Churchill's and Roosevelt's public platform success to their forceful delivery. No matter what is in hand, these men make themselves believe for the time being that that one thing is the most important on earth. Hence they speak to their audience in a do this or you perish manner. That kind of speaking wins, and it is that virile, strenuous, aggressive attitude which both distinguishes and maintains the platform careers of our greatest leaders. But let us look a little closer at the origins of inner force. How does conviction affect the man who feels it? We have answered the inquiry in the very question itself. He feels it. Conviction produces emotional tension. Study the pictures of Theodore Roosevelt and of Billy Sunday in action. Action is the word. Note the tension of their jaw muscles, the taut lines of sinews in their entire bodies, when reaching a climax of force. Moral and physical force are alike in being both preceded and accompanied by intensity, tension, tightness of the cords of power. It is this tautness of the bowstring, this knotting of the muscles, this contraction before the spring, that makes an audience feel, almost see, the reserve power in a speaker. In some really wonderful way, it is more what a speaker does not say and do that reveals the dynamo within. Anything may come from such stored-up force once it is let loose, and that keeps an audience alert, hanging on the lips of a speaker for his next word. After all, it is all a question of manhood, for a stuffed doll has neither convictions nor emotional tension. If you are upholstered with sawdust, keep off the platform, for your own speech will puncture you. Growing out of this conviction tension comes resolve to make the audience share that conviction tension. Purpose is the backbone of force. Without it, speech is flabby. It may glitter, but it is the iridescence of the spineless jellyfish. You must hold fast to your resolve if you would hold fast to your audience. Finally, all this conviction, tension, purpose is lifeless and useless unless it results in propulsion. You remember how Young, in his wonderful Night Thoughts, delineates the man who pushes his prudent purpose to resolve, resolves, and re-resolves, and dies the same. Let not your force die a-borning. Bring it to full life in its conviction, emotional tension, resolve, and propulsive power. Can force be acquired? Yes, if the acquirer has any such capacities as we have just outlined. How to acquire this vital factor is suggested in its very analysis. Live with your subject until you are convinced of its importance. If your message does not of itself arouse you to tension, pull yourself together. When a man faces the necessity of leaping across a crevasse, he does not wait for inspiration, he wills his muscles into tensity for the spring. It is not without purpose that our English language uses the same word to depict a mighty though delicate steel contrivance, and a quick leap through the air. Then resolve, and let it all end in actual punch. The truth is worth reiteration. The man within is the final factor. He must supply the fuel. The audience, or even the man himself, may add the match. It matters little which, only so that there be fire. However skillfully your engine is constructed, however well it works, you will have no force if the fire has gone out under the boiler. It matters little how well you have mastered poise, pause, modulation, and tempo. If your speech lacks fire, it is dead. Neither a dead engine nor a dead speech will move anybody. 4 factors of force are measurably within your control, and in that far may be acquired: ideas, feeling about the subject, wording, and delivery. Each of these is more or less fully discussed in this volume, except wording, which really requires a fuller rhetorical study than can here be ventured. It is, however, of the utmost importance that you should be aware of precisely how wording bears upon force in a sentence. Study The Working Principles of Rhetoric, by John Franklin Genung, or the rhetorical treatises of Adams Sherman Hill, of Charles Sears Baldwin, or any others whose names may easily be learned from any teacher. Here are a few suggestions on the use of words to attain force. Choice of words. Plain words are more forceful than words less commonly used. Juggle has more vigor than prestidigitate. Short words are stronger than long words. End has more directness than terminate. Saxon words are usually more forceful than Latinistic words. For force, use wars against rather than militate against. Specific words are stronger than general words. Pressman is more definite than printer. Connotative words, those that suggest more than they say, have more power than ordinary words. She let herself be married expresses more than she married. Epithets, figuratively descriptive words, are more effective than direct names. Go tell that old fox has more punch than go tell that sly fellow. Onomatopoetic words, words that convey the sense by the sound, are more powerful than other words. Crash is more effective than cataclysm. Arrangement of words. Cut out modifiers. Cut out connectives. Begin with words that demand attention. End with words that deserve distinction, says Professor Barrett Wendell. Set strong ideas over against weaker ones, so as to gain strength by the contrast. Avoid elaborate sentence structure. Short sentences are stronger than long ones. Cut out every useless word, so as to give prominence to the really important ones. Let each sentence be a condensed battering ram, swinging to its final blow on the attention. A familiar, homely idiom, if not worn by much use, is more effective than a highly formal, scholarly expression. Consider well the relative value of different positions in the sentence, so that you may give the prominent place to ideas you wish to emphasize. But, says someone, is it not more honest to depend on the inherent interest in a subject, its native truth, clearness and sincerity of presentation, and beauty of utterance to win your audience? Why not charm men instead of capturing them by assault? Why use force? There is much truth in such an appeal, but not all the truth. Clearness, persuasion, beauty, simple statement of truth, are all essential. Indeed, they are all definite parts of a forceful presentment of a subject, without being the only parts. Strong meat may not be as attractive as ices, but all depends on the appetite and the stage of the meal. You cannot deliver an aggressive message with caressing little strokes. No, jab it in with hard, swift solar plexus punches. You cannot strike fire from flint or from an audience with love taps. Say to a crowded theater in a lackadaisical manner, "It seems to me that the house is on fire," and your announcement may be greeted with a laugh. If you flash out the words, "The house is on fire," they will crush one another in getting to the exits. The spirit and the language of force are definite with conviction. No immortal speech in literature contains such expressions as "it seems to me," "I should judge," "in my opinion," "I suppose," "perhaps it is true." The speeches that will live have been delivered by men ablaze with the courage of their convictions, who uttered their words as eternal truth. Of Jesus it was said that the common people heard him gladly. Why? He taught them as one having authority. An audience will never be moved by what seems to you to be the truth, or what in your humble opinion may be so. If you honestly can, assert convictions as your conclusions. Be sure you are right before you speak your speech. Then utter your thoughts as though they were a Gibraltar of unimpeachable truth. Deliver them with the iron hand and confidence of a Cromwell. Assert them with the fire of authority. Pronounce them as an ultimatum. If you cannot speak with conviction, be silent. What force did that young minister have who, fearing to be too dogmatic, thus exhorted his hearers: "My friends, as I assume that you are, it appears to be my duty to tell you that if you do not repent, so to speak, forsake your sins, as it were, and turn to righteousness, if I may so express it, you will be lost in a measure." Effective speech must reflect the era. This is not a rose-water age, and a tepid, half-hearted speech will not win. This is the century of trip-hammers, of overland expresses that dash under cities and through mountain tunnels, and you must instill this spirit into your speech if you would move a popular audience. From a front seat, listen to a first-class company present a modern Broadway drama. Not a comedy, but a gripping, thrilling drama. Do not become absorbed in the story. Reserve all your attention for the technique and the force of the acting. There is a kick and a crash as well as an infinitely subtle intensity in the big climax speeches that suggest this lesson. The same well-calculated, restrained, delicately shaded force would simply rivet your ideas in the minds of your audience. An air gun will rattle birdshot against a window pane. It takes a rifle to wing a bullet through plate glass and the oaken walls beyond. When to use force. An audience is unlike the kingdom of heaven. The violent do not always take it by force. There are times when beauty and serenity should be the only bells in your chime. Force is only one of the great extremes of contrast. Use neither it nor quiet utterance to the exclusion of other tones. Be various, and in variety find even greater force than you could attain by attempting its constant use. If you are reading an essay on the beauties of the dawn, talking about the dainty bloom of a honeysuckle, or explaining the mechanism of a gas engine, a vigorous style of delivery is entirely out of place. But when you are appealing to wills and consciences for immediate action, forceful delivery wins. In such cases, consider the minds of your audience as so many safes that have been locked and the keys lost. Do not try to figure out the combinations. Pour a little nitroglycerin into the cracks and light the fuse. As these lines are being written, a contractor down the street is clearing away the rocks with dynamite to lay the foundations for a great building. When you want to get action, do not fear to use dynamite. The final argument for the effectiveness of force in public speech is the fact that everything must be enlarged for the purposes of the platform. That is why so few speeches read well in the reports on the morning after. Statements appear crude and exaggerated because they are unaccompanied by the forceful delivery of a glowing speaker before an audience heated to attentive enthusiasm. So, in preparing your speech, you must not err on the side of mild statement. Your audience will inevitably tone down your words in the cold gray of afterthought. When Phidias was criticized for the rough, bold outlines of a figure he had submitted in competition, he smiled, and asked that his statue and the one wrought by his rival should be set upon the column for which the sculpture was destined. When this was done, all the exaggerations and crudities, toned by distances, melted into exquisite grace of line and form. Each speech must be a special study in suitability and proportion. Omit the thunder of delivery if you will, but like Wendell Phillips put silent lightning into your speech. Make your thoughts breathe and your words burn. Birrell said, "Emerson writes like an electrical cat emitting sparks and shocks in every sentence." Go thou and speak likewise. Get the big stick into your delivery. Be forceful. Questions and exercises. 1. Illustrate by repeating a sentence from memory what is meant by employing force in speaking. 2. Which, in your opinion, is the most important of the technical principles of speaking that you have studied so far? Why? 3. What is the effect of too much force in a speech? Too little? 4. Note some uninteresting conversation or ineffective speech, and tell why it failed. 5. Suggest how it might be improved. 6. Why do speeches have to be spoken with more force than do conversations? 7. Read aloud the selection on page 84, using the technical principles outlined in chapters 3 to 8, but neglect to put any force behind the interpretation. What is the result? 8. Reread several times, doing your best to achieve force. 9. Which parts of the selection on page 84 require the most force? 10. Write a 5-minute speech not only discussing the errors of those who exaggerate and those who minimize the use of force, but by imitation show their weaknesses. Do not burlesque, but closely imitate. 11. Give a list of 10 themes for public addresses, saying which seem most likely to require the frequent use of force in delivery. 12. In your own opinion, do speakers usually err from the use of too much or too little force? 13. Define A. Bombast, B. Bathos, C. Sentimentality, D. Squeamish. 14. Say how the foregoing words describe weaknesses in public speech. 15. Recast in 20th century English Hamlet's directions to the players, page 88. 16. Memorize the following extracts from Wendell Phillips' speeches, and deliver them with the of Wendell Phillips' silent lightning delivery. We are for a revolution. We say, in behalf of these hunted lyings, whom God created, and who law-abiding Webster and Winthrop have sworn shall not find shelter in Massachusetts, we say that they may make their little motions, and pass their little laws in Washington, but that Faneuil Hall repeals them in the name of humanity and the Old Bay State. My advice to working men is this: If you want power in this country, if you want to make yourselves felt, if you do not want your children to wait long years before they have the bread on the table they ought to have, the leisure in their lives they ought to have, the opportunities in life they ought to have, if you don't want to wait yourselves, write on your banner, so that every political trimmer can read it, so that every politician, no matter how short-sighted he may be, can read it, "We never forget." If you launch the arrow of sarcasm at labor, "We never forget." If there is a division in Congress, and you throw your vote in the wrong scale, "We never forget." You may go down on your knees and say, "I am sorry I did the act." But we will say, "It will avail you in heaven to be sorry, but on this side of the grave, never." So that a man in taking up the labor question will know he is dealing with a hair-trigger pistol, and will say, "I am to be true to justice and to man. Otherwise I am a dead duck." In Russia there is no press, no debate, no explanation of what government does, no remonstrance allowed, no agitation of public issues. Dead silence, like that which reigns at the summit of Mont Blanc, freezes the whole empire, long ago described as a despotism tempered by assassination. Meanwhile, such despotism has unsettled the brains of the ruling family, as unbridled power doubtless made some of the 12 Caesars insane. A madman, sporting with the lives and comfort of 100 millions of men. The young girl whispers in her mother's ear, under a sealed roof, her pity for a brother knouted and dragged half dead into exile for his opinions. The next week she is stripped naked and flogged to death in the public square. No inquiry, no explanation, no trial, no protest, one dead uniform silence. The law of the tyrant. Where is the ground for any hope of peaceful change? No, no. In such a land dynamite and the dagger are the necessary and proper substitutes for Faneuil Hall. Anything that will make the madman quake in his bedchamber and rouse his victims into reckless and desperate resistance. This is the only view an American, the child of 1620 and 1776, can take of nihilism. Any other unsettles and perplexes the ethics of our civilization. Born within sight of Bunker Hill, son of Harvard, whose first pledge was truth, citizen of a republic based on the claim that no government is rightful unless resting on the consent of the people, and which assumes to lead in asserting the rights of humanity. I at least can say nothing else and nothing less. No, not if every tile on Cambridge roofs were a devil hooting my words. For practice on forceful selections, use The Irrepressible Conflict, page 67, Abraham Lincoln, page 76, Pass Prosperity Around, page 470, A Plea for Cuba, page 50. End of Section 9. Recording by Matthew Reese, Davenport, Iowa. Of the Art of Public Speaking. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Matthew Reese. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnagay and Joseph Berg Esenwein. Section 10. Feeling and Enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is that secret and harmonious spirit that hovers over the production of genius. Isaac Disraeli, Literary Character. If you are addressing a body of scientists on such a subject as the veins in a butterfly's wings, or on road structure, naturally your theme will not arouse much feeling in either you or your audience. These are purely mental subjects. But if you want men to vote for a measure that will abolish child labor, or if you would inspire them to take up arms for freedom, you must strike straight at their feelings. We lie on soft beds, sit near the radiator on a cold day, eat cherry pie, and devote our attention to one of the opposite sex, not because we have reasoned out that it is the right thing to do, but because it feels right. No one but a dyspeptic chooses his diet from a chart. Our feelings dictate what we shall eat and generally how we shall act. Man is a feeling animal, hence the public speaker's ability to arouse men to action depends almost wholly on his ability to touch their emotions. Negro mothers on the auction block, seeing their children sold away from them into slavery, have flamed out some of America's most stirring speeches. True, the mother did not have any knowledge of the technique of speaking, but she had something greater than all technique, more effective than reason: feeling. The great speeches of the world have not been delivered on tariff reductions or post office appropriations. The speeches that will live have been charged with emotional force. Prosperity and peace are poor developers of eloquence. When great wrongs are to be righted, when the public heart is flaming with passion, that is the occasion for memorable speaking. Patrick Henry made an immortal address, for in an epochal crisis he pleaded for liberty. He had roused himself to the point where he could honestly and passionately exclaim, "Give me liberty, or give me death." His fame would have been different if he had lived today and argued for the recall of judges. The power of enthusiasm. Political parties hire bands and pay for applause. They argue that for vote-getting to stir up enthusiasm is more effective than reasoning. How far they are right depends on the hearers, but there can be no doubt about the contagious nature of enthusiasm. A watch manufacturer in New York tried out 2 series of watch advertisements. One argued the superior construction, workmanship, durability, and guarantee offered with the watch. The other was headed, "A Watch to be Proud of," and dwelt upon the pleasure and pride of ownership. The latter series sold twice as many as the former. A salesman for a locomotive works informed the writer that in selling railroad engines, emotional appeal was stronger than an argument based on mechanical excellence. Illustrations without number might be cited to show that in all our actions we are emotional beings. The speaker who would speak efficiently must develop the power to arouse feeling. Webster, great debater that he was, knew that the real secret of a speaker's power was an emotional one. He eloquently says of eloquence: "Affected passion, intense expression, the pomp of declamation, all may aspire after it, they cannot reach it. It comes, if it comes at all, like the outbreak of a fountain from the earth, or the bursting forth of volcanic fires, with spontaneous, original, native force. The graces taught in the schools, the costly ornaments and studied contrivances of speech, shock and disgust men, when their own lives and the fate of their wives, their children, and their country hang on the decision of the hour. Then words have lost their power, rhetoric is in vain, and all elaborate oratory contemptible. Even genius itself then feels rebuked and subdued, as in the presence of higher qualities. Then patriotism is eloquent, then self-devotion is eloquent. The clear conception outrunning the deductions of logic, the high purpose, the firm resolve, the dauntless spirit, speaking on the tongue, beaming from the eye, informing every feature, and urging the whole man onward, right onward to his subject. This is eloquence. Or rather, it is something greater and higher than all eloquence. It is action, noble, sublime, godlike action. When traveling through the Northwest some time ago, one of the present writers strolled up a village street after dinner and noticed a crowd listening to a faker speaking on a corner from a goods box. Remembering Emerson's advice about learning something from every man we meet, the observer stopped to listen to this speaker's appeal. He was selling a hair tonic which he claimed to have discovered in Arizona. He removed his hat to show what this remedy had done for him, washed his face in it to demonstrate that it was as harmless as water, and enlarged on its merits in such an enthusiastic manner that the half-dollars poured in on him in a silver flood. When he had supplied the audience with hair tonic, he asked why a greater proportion of men than women were bald. No one knew. He explained that it was because women wore thinner-soled shoes, and so made a good electrical connection with Mother Earth, while men wore thick, dry-soled shoes that did not transmit the Earth's electricity to the body. Men's hair, not having a proper amount of electrical food, died and fell out. Of course he had a remedy, a little copper plate that should be nailed on the bottom of the shoe. He pictured in enthusiastic and vivid terms the desirability of escaping baldness, and paid tributes to his copper plates. Strange as it may seem when the story is told in cold print, the speaker's enthusiasm had swept his audience with him, and they crushed around his stand with outstretched quarters in their anxiety to be the possessors of these magical plates. Emerson's suggestion had been well taken. The observer had seen again the wonderful, persuasive power of enthusiasm. Enthusiasm sent millions crusading into the Holy Land to redeem it from the Saracens. Enthusiasm plunged Europe into a 30 years' war over religion. Enthusiasm sent 3 small ships plying the unknown sea to the shores of a new world. When Napoleon's army were worn out and discouraged in their ascent of the Alps, the Little Corporal stopped them and ordered the bands to play the Marseillaise. Under its soul-stirring strains there were no Alps. Listen. Emerson said, "Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm." Carlyle declared that every great movement in the annals of history has been the triumph of enthusiasm. It is as contagious as measles. Eloquence is half inspiration. Sweep your audience with you in a pulsation of enthusiasm. Let yourself go. "A man," said Oliver Cromwell, "never rises so high as when he knows not whither he is going." How are we to acquire and develop enthusiasm? It is not to be slipped on like a smoking jacket. A book cannot furnish you with it. It is a growth, an effect. But an effect of what? Let us see. Emerson wrote, "A painter told me that nobody could draw a tree without in some sort becoming a tree, or draw a child by studying the outlines of his form merely, but by watching for a time his motion and plays, the painter enters his nature, and then can draw him at will in every attitude." So Roos entered into the inmost nature of his sheep. I knew a draughtsman employed in a public survey who found that he could not sketch the rocks until their geological structure was first explained to him. When Sarah Bernhardt plays a difficult role, she frequently will speak to no one from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until after the performance. From the hour of 4 she lives her character. Booth, it is reported, would not permit anyone to speak to him between the acts of his Shakespearean roles, for he was Macbeth then, not Booth. Dante, exiled from his beloved Florence, condemned to death, lived in caves half starved. Then Dante wrote out his heart in the Divine Comedy. Bunyan entered into the spirit of his Pilgrim's Progress so thoroughly that he fell down on the floor of Bedford jail and wept for joy. Turner, who lived in a garret, arose before daybreak and walked over the hills 9 miles to see the sun rise on the ocean, that he might catch the spirit of its wonderful beauty. Wendell Phillips' sentences were full of silent lightning because he bore in his heart the sorrow of 5,000,000 slaves. There is only one way to get feeling into your speaking, and whatever else you forget, forget not this. You must actually enter into the character you impersonate, the cause you advocate, the case you argue. Enter into it so deeply that it clothes you, enthralls you, possesses you wholly. Then you are, in the true meaning of the word, in sympathy with your subject, for its feeling is your feeling. You feel with it, and therefore your enthusiasm is both genuine and contagious. The carpenter, who spoke as never man spake, uttered words born out of a passion of love for humanity. He had entered into humanity, and thus became man. But we must not look upon the foregoing words as a facile prescription for decocting a feeling, which may then be ladled out to a complacent audience in quantities to suit the need of the moment. Genuine feeling in a speech is bone and blood of the speech itself, and not something that may be added to it or subtracted at will. In the ideal address theme, speaker and audience become one, fused by the emotion and thought of the hour. The need of sympathy for humanity. It is impossible to lay too much stress on the necessity for the speaker's having a broad and deep tenderness for human nature. One of Victor Hugo's biographers attributes his power as an orator and writer to his wide sympathies and profound religious feelings. Recently we heard the editor of Collier's Weekly speak on short story writing, and he so often emphasized the necessity for this broad love of humanity, this truly religious feeling, that he apologized twice for delivering a sermon. Few, if any, of the immortal speeches were ever delivered for a selfish or a narrow cause. They were born out of a passionate desire to help humanity. Instances: Paul's address to the Athenians on Mars Hill, Lincoln's Gettysburg speech, the Sermon on the Mount, Henry's address before the Virginia Convention of Delegates. The seal and sign of greatness is a desire to serve others. Self-preservation is the first law of life, but self-abnegation is the first law of greatness and of art. Selfishness is the fundamental cause of all sin. It is the thing that all great religions, all worthy philosophies have struck at. Out of a heart of real sympathy and love comes the speeches that move humanity. Former United States Senator Albert J. Beveridge, in an introduction to one of the volumes of Modern Eloquence, says, The profoundest feeling among the masses, the most influential element in their character, is the religious element. It is as instinctive and elemental as the law of self-preservation. It informs the whole intellect and personality of the people, and he who would greatly influence the people by uttering their unformed thoughts must have this great and unanalyzable bond of sympathy with them. When the men of Ulster armed themselves to oppose the passage of the Home Rule Act, one of the present writers assigned to 100 men Home Rule as the topic for an address to be prepared by each. Among this group were some brilliant speakers, several of them experienced lawyers and political campaigners. Some of their addresses showed a remarkable knowledge and grasp of the subject. Others were clothed in the most attractive phrases. But a clerk, without a great deal of education and experience, arose and told how he spent his boyhood days in Ulster, how his mother, while holding him on her lap, had pictured to him Ulster's deeds of valor. He spoke of a picture in his uncle's home that showed the men of Ulster conquering a tyrant and marching on to victory. His voice quivered, and with a hand pointing upward, he declared that if the men of Ulster went to war they would not go alone. A great God would go with them. The speech thrilled and electrified the audience. It thrills yet as we recall it. The high-sounding phrases, the historical knowledge, the philosophical treatment of the other speakers largely failed to arouse any deep interest, while the genuine conviction and feeling of the modest clerk, speaking on a subject that lay deep in his heart, not only electrified his audience, but won their personal sympathy for the cause he advocated. As Webster said, it is of no use to try to pretend to sympathy or feelings. It cannot be done successfully. Nature is forever putting a premium on reality. What is false is soon detected as such. The thoughts and feelings that create and mold the speech in the study must be born again when the speech is delivered from the platform. Do not let your words say one thing and your voice and attitude another. There is no room here for half-hearted, nonchalant methods of delivery. Sincerity is the very soul of eloquence. Carlyle was right. No Mirabeau, Napoleon, Burns, Cromwell, no man adequate to do anything, but is first of all in right earnest about it, what I call a sincere man. I should say, sincerity, a great, deep, genuine sincerity, is the first characteristic of all men in any way heroic. Not the sincerity that calls itself sincere. Ah, no, that is a very poor matter indeed, a shallow braggart, conscious sincerity, oftenest self-conceit mainly. The great man's sincerity is of the kind he cannot speak of, is not conscious of. Questions and exercises. It is one thing to convince the would-be speaker that he ought to put feeling into his speeches. Often it is quite another thing for him to do it. The average speaker is afraid to let himself go, and continually suppresses his emotions. When you put enough feeling into your speeches, they will sound overdone to you, unless you are an experienced speaker. They will sound too strong if you are not used to enlarging for platform or stage, for the delineation of the emotions must be enlarged for public delivery. 1. Study the following speech, going back in your imagination to the time and circumstances that brought it forth. Make it not a memorized historical document, but feel the emotions that gave it birth. The speech is only an effect. Live over in your own heart the causes that produced it, and try to deliver it at white heat. It is not possible for you to put too much real feeling into it, though of course it would be quite easy to rant and fill it with false emotion. This speech, according to Thomas Jefferson, started the ball of the Revolution rolling. Men were then willing to go out and die for liberty. Patrick Henry's speech before the Virginia Convention of Delegates. Mr. President, it is natural to man to indulge in the illusions of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth, and listen to the song of that siren till she transforms us to beasts. Is this the part of wise men engaged in a great and arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be the number of those who, having eyes, see not, and having ears, hear not the things which so nearly concern our temporal salvation? For my part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst, and to provide for it. I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging of the future but by the past. And judging by the past, I wish to know what there has been in the conduct of the British Ministry for the last 10 years to justify those hopes with which gentlemen have been pleased to solace themselves and the House. Is it that insidious smile with which our petition has been lately received? Trust it not, sir, it will prove a snare to your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition comports with those warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our land. Are fleets and armies necessary to a work of love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called in to win back our love? Let us not deceive ourselves, sir. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. I ask, gentlemen, sir, what means this martial array, if its purpose be not to force us to submission? Can gentlemen assign any other possible motive for it? Has Great Britain any enemy in this quarter of the world to call for all this accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir, she has none. They are meant for us, they can be meant for no other. They are sent over to bind and to rivet upon us those chains which the British ministry have been so long forging. And what have we to oppose to them? Shall we try argument? Sir, we have been trying that for the last 10 years. Have we anything new to offer upon the subject? Nothing. We have held the subject up in every light of which it is capable, but it has been all in vain. Shall we resort to entreaty and humble supplication? What terms shall we find which have not been already exhausted? Let us not, I beseech you, sir, deceive ourselves longer. Sir, we have done everything that could be done to avert the storm which is now coming on. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne, and have implored its interposition to arrest the tyrannical hands of the ministry and parliament. Our petitions have been slighted. Our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult. Our supplications have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne. In vain, after these things, may we indulge in the fond hope of peace and reconciliation. There is no longer any room for hope. If we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve inviolate those inestimable privileges for which we have been so long contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have been so long engaged, and which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our contest shall be obtained, we must fight. I repeat it, sir, we must fight. An appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left us. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be the next week or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed, and when a British guard shall be stationed in every house? Shall we gather strength by irresolution and inaction? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by laying supinely on our backs and hugging the delusive phantom of hope, until our enemies have bound us hand and foot? Sir, we are not weak, if we make a proper use of those means which the God of nature hath placed in our power. 3 millions of people, armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such country as that which we possess, are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just power who presides over the destinies of nations, and who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, the active, the brave. Besides, sir, we have no election. If we were base enough to desire it, it is now too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged. Their clanking may be heard on the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come. I repeat it, sir, let it come. It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace. But there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, almighty powers! I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty, or give me death. 2. Live over in your imagination all the solemnity and sorrow that Lincoln felt at the Gettysburg Cemetery. The feeling in this speech is very deep, but it is quieter and more subdued than the preceding one. The purpose of Henry's address was to get action. Lincoln's speech was meant only to dedicate the last resting place of those who had acted. Read it over and over, see page 50, until it burns in your soul. Then commit it and repeat it for emotional expression. 3. Beecher's speech on Lincoln, page 76. Thurston's speech on A Plea for Cuba, page 50, and the following selection are recommended for practice in developing feeling in delivery. A living force that brings to itself all the resources of imagination, all the inspirations of feeling, all that is influential in body, in voice, in eye, in gesture, in posture, in the whole animated man, is in strict analogy with the divine thought and the divine arrangement, and there is no misconstruction more utterly untrue and fatal than this, that oratory is an artificial thing, which deals with baubles and trifles for the sake of making bubbles of pleasure for transient effect on mercurial audiences. So far from that, it is the consecration of the whole man to the noblest purposes to which one can address himself, the education and inspiration of his fellow men by all that there is in learning, by all that there is in thought, by all that there is in feeling, by all that there is in all of them, sent home through the channels of taste and beauty. Henry Ward Beecher. 4. What, in your opinion, are the relative values of thought and feeling in a speech? 5. Could we dispense with either? 6. What kinds of selections or occasions require much feeling and enthusiasm? Which require little? 7. Invent a list of 10 subjects for speeches, saying which would give the most room for pure thought, and which for feeling. 8. Prepare and deliver a 10-minute speech denouncing the imaginary, unfeeling plea of an attorney. He may be either the counsel for the defense or the prosecuting attorney, and the accused may be assumed to be either guilty or innocent, at your option. 9. Is feeling more important than the technical principles expounded in chapters 3 to 7? Why? 10. Analyze the secret of some effective speech or speaker. To what is the success due? 11. Give an example from your own observation of the effect of feeling and enthusiasm on listeners. 12. Memorize Carlyle's and Emerson's remarks on enthusiasm. 13. Deliver Patrick Henry's address, page 110, and Thurston's speech, page 50, without show of feeling or enthusiasm. What is the result? 14. Repeat, with all the feeling these selections demand. What is the result? 15. What steps do you intend to take to develop the power of enthusiasm and feeling in speaking? 16. Write and deliver a 5-minute speech ridiculing a speaker who uses bombast, pomposity, and over-enthusiasm. Imitate him. End of section 10. Recording by Matthew Reese, Davenport, Iowa.